Welcome to Make It Simple, where we take complicated issues and, with the help of a friend, break them down into ideas we can understand, truths we can apply, and questions worth pondering. I'm your host, Matt Popovitz, and with me on the show today is stand-up comedian Andrew Stanley. If you're not familiar with Andrew's background, it's a pretty interesting one. He is the son of Andy Stanley, the communicator and pastor and leadership expert, as well as Reverend Dr. Charles Stanley. That's his grandfather. So he comes from a legacy of pastors and incredible communicators, and we're going to talk about his journey from his family, where he grew up as a preacher's kid, to full-time stand-up comedy and really a rising star in the world of stand-up comedy. In fact, he's fresh off of a stint with Nate Bargatze on Nate Bargatze's tour, so we're going to talk about that and so much more. And also joining me on today's program is my co-host, Rachel Ryder. So stick around for this conversation. It's a good one. And this is a good chance to remind you that VoxCon 2027 is happening in January of 2027 right here in Houston, Texas. And Andrew Stanley is going to be with us. He's going to do a full comedy set with us as part of the conference. You don't want to miss it. VoxCon is a gathering of creatives and communicators in the faith space where we are able to refine our voice and hone our craft, create community with one another, and get encouragement and resourcing for sharing the most important message in the world. And I want you to join us. So if you're a creative or communicator in the faith space and you want to work on your craft and get to know some other people who are doing similar work, join us at VoxCon. For more information and to purchase your ticket, you can head to gotovox.com. That's GOTOVOX.com. We hope to see you right here in Houston, Texas in January 2027 for VoxCon. With that, let's dive into our conversation with Andrew Stanley about being a stand-up comic. Andrew Stanley, welcome to Make It Simple. We're so excited to talk with you today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So for those in our audience who don't know, Andrew Stanley is the hottest comedian on the circuit these days, right? That's the rumor. Like you are the guy everybody's watching for. I mean, you just played a stadium with what, 15,000 people in it? I mean, you're kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah, many people are saying that I'm the next big deal.
That's what we're saying.
Many. Yes, I was performing 15,000 people. They were not there for me, but I was there for them. So I was opening for Nate Bargatze, is what he's referencing a few weeks ago in Phoenix, and it is fun. It's fun to be in front of that many. You never think you could be in front of that many people. It's not even a number that makes sense. But when you put a little round stage in the middle of a basketball arena, it's you can fit them. It's crazy.
Yeah, and so my first question is this: like, when did you make the decision? I'm going to do comedy. This is my calling. This is going to be my life's work. And did you ever envision at that point that you'd ever be, opening for a comic like Nate and performing in a venue like a basketball arena?
No, I mean, definitely I should have, I guess, but I did not start comedy thinking it would become my job. I started actually 10 years ago this month. We're recording this in July of 2026. I did my first open mic July of 2016. So this is I don't know what you're supposed to do for a 10-year work anniversary, but
come on a podcast.
Yeah, I guess you just do a podcast and announce it to people that are probably listening to it later. But no, I started doing open mics because I was in corporate finance and I thought I was funny and I didn't know how to make that a job. And I thought I could be a writer. And so I'm sitting in my cubicle just being like, I don't think this is what I'm supposed to do. But also I don't know how to just start being a comedy writer. So I reached out to, I feel like I'm name dropping so much in this first 3 minutes of this episode with Nate. But
it's all good.
I've known Jeff Foxworthy since I was like 12 years old, just from being in Atlanta and through my family. And I didn't know him. Like I didn't have his phone number, but he knew my dad, and we had been on a mission trip to Kenya together when I was like 10 or 11.
Really? And with Jeff Fox?
So and people in Kenya would recognize him. It was crazy. He's internationally known.
That's how you know you're big. That's how you know you're big. You're on a mission trip in Kenya, and people are repeating your premise back to you from your.
Yeah, it wasn't so much the Kenyans that were recognizing him, but there was a lot of other people who were visiting were like, "Is that Jeff Foxworthy?" He's the nicest guy in the world, and he agreed to have lunch with me, or just I think I asked him for help, and he goes, "Why don't we have lunch?" And So now when people ask me, how do you get started in stand-up comedy? I always say it's very easy. You just get your, mega pastor father to connect you with one of the most successful stand-up comedians of all time, have lunch with him, and then just ask him.
It's easy.
So that's the route.
Yeah.
But Jeff I was not asking him to be a stand-up comedian. I was asking him how I could be like a writer on The Office, is kind of what I was visualizing for myself. And so he connected me with a writer friend of his that does a lot of comedy projects. And that guy lived in another city, so we were just emailing. And he basically told me, I got the vibe. He was like, well, Jeff asked me to help you, so I will help you. And he said, if we're going to, first step, why don't you write 5 minutes of jokes and go do them at a stand-up comedy club, open mic night. And I really didn't want to do it. I was not interested in performing at all. Never enjoyed being on stage. Everybody my whole life, because my dad and my granddad were both pastors, would ask me, well, are you a good speaker? Are you going to be a preacher? They always expected me to like that, and I never really did. But I really wanted this guy to help me, so I decided to go to the Laughing Skull Lounge on like a Tuesday night and sign up for the open mic. And things kind of started to slowly fall into place. Nobody really does great their first few times, but you just kind of have to do well enough to want to keep going. And I kind of just got the itch, kept doing it, and then 10 years later, I have no other job.
And how long did it take for you to get to that point where this is your job. This is all you do. It's not something that's running alongside your work in finance, but it is the thing for Andrew Stanley.
Yeah, I did both for about 2.5 years. I was working cubicle 9 to 5 every Monday through Friday. And I'd get off of work and go do an open mic or a show around Atlanta. I pretty quickly started to get opportunities on the church side of things because of nepotism, but I would get asked to go do like, hey, do you want to do this thing where you're like introducing your dad at this big conference? And I would say, yeah, sure. And I'd get there and it'd be thousands of people. And I'd be like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be in front of thousands of people yet. But thankfully they would go pretty well. I had at least enough funny, I had like 7 minutes that was working. And so I could do that. And then I started to get emails from organizations that were like, hey, we have a fundraiser. Will you come, do what we saw you do at our fundraiser? And I'm like, sure, I'll come to Missouri. And then they're like, all right, how much do you charge? And I'm like, I usually have to like beg people to let me do this. So right. Whatever you want. And I think I set a number to the first people and they're like, we have to pay you more than that. Like to be able to justify like you're being a professional. And so I was starting to get a lot of opportunities kind of like that. And so I was really using all my vacation days from work, classic big company. I get like 10 vacation days a year. And then, after a few years of service, you get an extra day. But I was using all of them on going to do gigs that I was getting asked to do. So I really had 2 jobs, but one of them was just something that I loved, and one of them was something I was just doing. And so about after 2.5 years of really doing both, it was October, and I was running out of vacation days, and I was getting booked. I was booked through March of the next year, and I was like, all right, I either have to quit my job or not do these shows. And at that point I just really felt like this is what I love, and I should have, I had so much support from my family, my girlfriend who's now my wife. Everybody was just pushing me to make the leap. So after doing stand-up for like less than 3 years, I quit my day job to do it full-time, which is really fast. And yeah. I would never recommend someone do that unless they had a runway kind of like I had. And I just knew, I'll be a comedian for 6 months, and then hopefully the runway will keep building itself out in front of me. And thankfully it has. So have not looked back. But I did just get hired a few months ago to go back and do a gig for my old company. They hired me to come perform for their whole like leadership. So it was like 300 executives from the company that all had no idea who I was because I was 6 employees below them on the org chart.
Have you done that gig yet?
I did. It was really fun. The CEO just brought me on stage without telling them I was a comedian. He just said, next up, we have a former budget analyst. Please welcome to the stage, Andrew Stanley. He introduced me so fast. I was still in the back of the ballroom. I had to like run around to get to stage. He was already in his seat by the time I got to stage. And thankfully, it went really well. And when I got off, one of my friends from the company was there, and he was like, man, that was awesome. Do you know who they had this morning to speak before you? And I said, no. And he said, Nick Saban. And I was like, oh, so Nick Saban opened for me for my
Nice.
old company.
Yeah. So you said that this started because you were interested in being a writer. Was there a point where you were like, I guess I'm not being a writer? Or,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. For these last 10 years, I've been so focused on stand up and I love it so much that it's just been hard to think about spending my time, my creative energy on other things. And there's certainly been times where I'll write sketches and, I'll get hired to do little writing projects here and there. And I do really enjoy it. And I think I'm pretty good at it. It's just it's a lane on the same highway, but it's just, I haven't really been over in it very much. But I do love it. I do really like it. And I could see myself taking on more of that in the future. But it's really just been a complete shift into stand-up world.
Well, it's interesting because we often have this idea of like what we want to do or what we want to be. Like you held it loosely and you jumped in a pool and it turned out you were in a different ocean. So that's a really fascinating.
You don't hit what you're aiming for, but you still hit something good.
Yeah.
Andrew, you mentioned before your grandfather, if people don't know, is Charles Stanley. Your dad, Andy Stanley, is arguably one of the more influential communicators in the country. That's a massive legacy that you're connected to. It also could be seen as a big shadow that is cast. How did that legacy kind of shape you as a comedian? And did you ever feel pressure to be in the family business, so to speak?
Definitely a shadow. I'm really grateful to my family for not making that harder than it kind of naturally has to be. My dad, similarly grew up with my granddad kind of being under his shadow. So he's super familiar with me and my siblings' situation. So he really was intentional about not making us feel that way. I went to school for a finance degree, my brother's in marketing, and my sister went to seminary and is writing a bunch of cool books, and she kind of naturally found her way into ministry without it being pushed on her. And I think that's the way my dad would be like, that's perfect. So I always say I never felt any pressure from inside the house. Outside the house, people were just always asking, and it's a natural question. I catch myself doing that to people all the time, or like asking them the question they're probably tired of being asked just because it's easy in there. Like the graduating senior in high school, you're always like, so what are your plans for this fall? And you're like, sorry, I know everybody asks you that this whole year, and you're tired of not having an answer or saying the same answer. So I never felt a lot of pressure. I definitely do feel a responsibility to represent my family well. And as a Christian, I think preachers' kids do struggle with this sometimes. And it's definitely something that I have felt where, we're supposed to be out there representing Jesus and being a Christian because of our faith. And when you're a preacher's kid, a lot of times you feel that in a real way, but also pressure to represent your family well, because your family represents that thing as well to many people, especially in your community. And so for me, it's always been like, am I making good decisions for the right reasons? Like, am I making sure I'm caring about, am I worried about representing my family or worried about representing my faith? And it's all under the same umbrella, which is great, but it's definitely something that I have always had in the back of my mind. And certainly as I've gotten into stand-up, and when you start out, you're in these not horrible rooms, but like you're in these shows hearing horrible things at these open mics. I always say the dirtiest comedy show in America is not the dirty comedian that you're thinking of. It's at an open mic somewhere in a city. It's the dirtiest stuff you'll ever hear. And it definitely, I was like, can I be here? Can I be in these rooms hearing this night after night? Like, I know I'm not like doing it, but consuming it is certainly got to do something to you.
Right.
And my answer was, yeah, I think I'm still supposed to be here. And I would think like, all right, well, I'm going to be clean, but are these people going to see me on stage going after some of this stuff and be like, what is Andrew doing here? But I found the opposite. I found that people are like, man, that's awesome that you're comfortable in this space, even though I know that's not what you're used to. And on the flip side of that, I get to be a lot of people's only Christian friend.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a cool place to be. And it's not something I'm ever trying to force on anybody, but I have had many comedians over the years reach out and ask, whether they're going through something hard or starting to be interested in faith, ask me. Like, I'm kind of the person they know that they can ask that question to. And so me just being in those spaces, I felt like was worth it, even though at times I was like, is this even the right thing to do? And is this looking weird for my family. But they've all been nothing but supportive, and I would probably benefit from them being a little less supportive, is what I always tell them. I go, man, can you imagine how much better of a comedian I would be if y'all had been worse parents?
Right. Yeah. Give me some
Give
hardships
better stories.
to shape me. I need some parent trauma to make me a funnier person.
Right.
There are certain professions like I think like Matt being a pastor or being a comedian takes quite a bit of vulnerability, and that can be exhausting. Like what's that like? Like I think it's exhausting to keep talking about like what's your process of being a comedian. So not like how do you come up with jokes, but like how do you handle just the vulnerability and the like you're getting up on stage every night being like, here's my soul, please think I'm funny. Like how do you handle that?
Yeah, well, there's like two levels of vulnerability to it, I think. One is, like you said, just getting on stage and allowing everyone to assess your every word and every movement for however many minutes you're on stage. You're just like, hey, judge me. Hopefully you'll like me enough that you can feel happy by experiencing me.
Right.
But also, when it doesn't go well, it's the loneliest place to stand. And every night, even if you're doing jokes that normally work, that audience may not connect with them, and you may be standing up there feeling like you have nowhere to go. And no matter how funny you are, how prepared you are, that just will happen to you. So you always know it's possible. And the best way to get through it is for it to happen to you a lot of times and just be like, yeah, sometimes this is how it feels. So that's the hardest at the beginning. I'm way less affected by that. It happens less, and I'm less affected by it when it happens now, which is nice. But to get to that point, you do have to do so many bad shows and tell so many bad jokes, and a lot of times it's your fault. It's like, yeah, I didn't write well enough, so now I have to stand up here and try to dig out of a hole.
Yeah.
So that's vulnerable. And then there's, what you choose to share with strangers. Decide how vulnerable you're going to be with what you're sharing about yourself or about your life. And there are comedians all across the spectrum of that. There's people like, I'm trying to be careful about who I say, but like the one who comes to mind is Louis C.K. Louis C.K. is not a clean comedian. He was one of the first to ever share about parenting in a way that was like, I don't think you're supposed to say that about your kid. Like it was so, whether they were real or not, they came across as extremely real and authentic. And that's a huge style of comedy now. There's so many comedians that are out there telling stories about themselves, talking about their struggles, really being an open book. Like Mark Maron famously is like that. His specials are, so personal and so about him and his thoughts and his, weaknesses. And then there's comedians like Jerry Seinfeld and Mark Normand who are up there telling jokes, and you don't learn anything about them by hearing their jokes, but they're incredibly good joke writers. The hour you'll laugh so much, and there's not nearly as much personal vulnerability, but also they're telling short jokes, and some of them might not work. And so there's, like I said, there's built-in vulnerability to all of it. But where I kind of sit on that side of it is I do tell a lot of stories. I'm not out here trying to bare my soul or like talk about my deepest struggles, but I do love to tell stories about growing up, what it was like, being a homeschooled preacher's kid, feeling like a sheltered kid that went to public school, and exploring a lot of those things that are just fun and light. But certainly talking about myself, and now being married, talking about our marriage in ways that Anna and I both are okay with sharing, but sometimes we're like, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this part. And so that's now not just affecting me, it's affecting, my wife. And now I have a 1-year-old daughter who I'm sure right now I can say whatever I want, but one day she's going to be like, hey, can you not say that about me, actually?
Right. Yeah.
So it's all of that. It's a very vulnerable art form, but it's also like so rewarding because you get to share your, whatever you choose to share, you get to share. You get to have people agree with you. Like, that's funny. That happened to me. The things that make people laugh the most are when you can find something that they are relating to and present it to them in a funny way. And that just makes everybody feel together. And that makes you feel great because they're laughing, but also makes you feel like super supported and not alone in like something that people are like, oh yeah, that's me too.
Yeah. Well, just building off of Rachel's question, the first thing that came to mind for me as you were answering that, Andrew, was how do you protect your heart in this profession when you're performing for a living, right? And so laughs equal life, and success, and silence equals death, right? At least it can feel that way, right? And so much of your identity, obviously, for all of us, no matter what your line of work is tied to how we're doing and how we're performing in our line of work. And so when you're constantly stepping up in front of a crowd and constantly essentially saying, judge me, tell me whether or not I'm funny, tell me whether or not I'm successful, that can go directly to the heart. Like when you are successful professionally, like you are alive and you're good, and when you're not, you're dying and you're bad. And that can be really hard on the heart, on the soul. So like, how do you protect your heart as you perform for a living?
No, that's such a good question. And, it is, it can be hard. I think that, the obvious thing is that you just can't let your self-worth be determined by these group of strangers you're in front of every night. Like you have to have an order of value in your life to where you're like, yeah, I do care what they think, but I care much more about what my Heavenly Father thinks, what my family thinks, what my wife thinks, and to not get your self-worth from these strangers. But also you are asking for their feedback every night, and it does matter. It really matters. And on the other side of it, it's really, you get numb to it. When I first started, if I had a bad set, it would, until I had a good set, I would just kind of be in a bad mood. You just kind of reliving, like, I'm doing as well as my last set went, if you ask me how I'm doing. And that's obviously not a healthy place to be, but it's when you're new at stand-up, it's really hard to not be that way, at least for a little while. And then when you had a good set, I would be just on cloud 9 for as long as that would last, until I'd go back and come back down to earth on stage, later that week. And now I can go out and have the best set of my life and, be asleep in my bed an hour later. Whereas when that used to happen, I wouldn't be able to sleep for, I'd have too much adrenaline. And now when I have a bad set, I get off stage and I'm like, oh, that stinks. But the next day I'm not waking up really thinking about it. So you get numb to it just for the reps. Doing hundreds of shows a year, hundreds of sets, like, you're just going to have so many good ones and bad ones and fine ones that not to let the good ones or the bad ones have too much weight in what you think about the way your career is going or your self-worth. I do think it's harder for comedians that are more open with their lives and the ones that are really, like I said earlier, like bearing their souls, because it's one thing when you're like, the audience doesn't like my jokes, but it's another thing when you're like, I think the audience just doesn't like me. Like, there is definitely like a different feeling to an audience rejecting a joke about something that has nothing to do with you, or rejecting something where you're like, hey, you guys think this is funny about me? Do you guys relate? No? Oh, not at all. Oh, actually, you hate that I... So there's definitely that level of it.
But it's a level of maturity that it sounds like you've reached, where you're able to, take the work seriously, but to not take it so personally, right? Well,
that's one thing that comedians struggle with too, is they get too comfortable with bombing. Yeah. And you see it a lot. If you go to some of these open mics, you will see comedians do terrible, and they get off stage and you're like, I think that should have affected you a little more. You should have hated that. You seemed fine. And that was really, really not fine. So you'd be surprised at how often that's what happens when you do stand-up every night. You just get to where, I like that I do this, so how it goes is secondary to that I did it. And I just am here to hang out with my friends and drink beer and, tell the same jokes that work 25% of the time. So it's both sides. People that take it way too heavy and people that don't take it seriously. So you're right that you do have to still take it seriously.
Yeah. You got to find a way to like live in that tension of saying, I'm going to be a professional about this. I'm going to care about how I do, but how I do is not a reflection of who I am.
Right. You have to treat it like you would any job where you do good at work or bad at work. It's like, it is important, but it's not who you are.
Well, I say that as one, like I'm like in my line of work, I'm standing up on a stage preaching to people every single week. And it is hard for me, even after now 20 years of doing this. It is hard for me. It's a battle every week to say, look, I did my best professionally. I don't think the sermon landed exactly the way I want it to, but I'm not going to let it hijack my Sunday afternoon where I've got to be engaged with my family. Because there were seasons in life when I was a young communicator where, if every joke that I told in my sermon hit and then people were nodding and going, yes, and I even got an amen, then I was the best dad in the world that afternoon. Like we're going out for lunch and there's ice cream after. But then when the sermon didn't seem to land, like I'm going to go take a nap and I'm going to be a grouch for the rest of the day. And my wife was like,
canceling our vacation.
Yeah. But my wife was like, you have to grow out of this. Like, this is ultimately, she saw it like, this is immature. Like, this is not sustainable. You got to find a way to be like, take the work seriously, but then you have to find a way to have kind of like Jason Bateman always talks about, like a little bit of sexy indifference to like, it went bad or it went great, but I'm not going to let it take control of who I am and how I live in the immediate aftermath. And that's hard. That's hard. I'm still working on it 20 years into this.
It is hard because you care about it, and it's hard to not feel like you didn't do well at something that you care about and then just shake it off. But you're right. The more you do it, the more you can the more you practice that, the better, the more you can kind of exist normally. But I'm always interested talking to pastors because you talked about like feeling like your sermon didn't go well sometimes. And the great and terrible thing about stand-up is that you always know exactly how you did because it's so measurable every moment how much they like you. They're literally making a noise to tell you how much they like you or not. And I guess for when you've been a pastor for a long time, you learn to measure those more subtle signs of, you know, how many people are taking notes, how many people are looking at their phones or kind of seem like they're waiting for this to end versus leaning in and really absorbing it. But what are the things for you that you're paying attention to that let you know how it's going?
Well, really, it's eyes up engagement in the room.
Yeah.
There are some people who, when they're engaged, they have to kind of look away. Like my wife is one of those people. Like she can't look at me while she's actively listening to me. I don't know what that says about our relationship or our marriage, but like when she's sitting and listening to me preach, like she's often like looking off to the side, and I can tell she's locked in though. But for everybody else, it is whether or not their eyes are up, and there's kind of almost like this leaning forward and leaning in, and you can kind of feel it in the room. Like it's a special kind of quiet in the room when everybody's engaged. And so I'm trying to be aware of what kind of quiet do I have in the room, because there's this kind of quiet that is a sign of inattentiveness. And then there's this quiet where you can literally feel, and I'm sure you know this as a communicator, like, oh, I've got them right now. I have got them right now. That's why it's quiet. Yeah. And so I'm listening for that. I'm looking for eyes up and engaged, not down, scrolling their phone, checking their reservation for lunch, that kind of thing. And then is there any kind of emotional response from anybody in the room to some of the things that I think should get some kind of an emotional response? You know,
the cues you have. Yeah.
Yeah. And if it hits with somebody, then I know it probably hit with others, right?
Do you ask for amens?
I don't. That's not really part of my tradition.
I didn't think so.
But
I wonder if that's what that is when pastors do that. I always am like, is that their way of like trying to see how it's going?
I think what it is, I think it's about resetting engagement. Like resetting. It's about it's a reset. Can I get an amen? Heads are up and go, oh yeah, amen. They might not be able to tell you exactly what he said a moment before, but it's about, all right, everybody lock back in. I just made a point.
Yeah.
Let's keep going forward, right?
That's a great way of that makes sense. I might start doing amens.
You should.
So,
that could be your thing.
Yeah.
Just like throw it in.
Yeah. See how it goes.
I wonder about like and this may sound silly, but like the technical part of your job. Like, so you as a stand-up comedian, do you have like a library of material and you plan for your event that you have that night? And then you have a set, like Matt memorizes his sermon on Sunday and he knows what he's going to show up and say. Do you know what you're going to show up and say? Or do you go have a rough outline and you know what you're going to say, but depending on how the crowd goes, you decide where you're going to go?
Great
like
question.
How much room is there for improv? Or is it like, this isn't working, I'm going to pivot because this crowd doesn't like this story about my family?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, once you're in the middle of a story, it's tough to bail out. I've definitely had that where you're like, you didn't like the first minute of this story.
Yeah, they don't like dogs. We're not going to talk
in the
about
last
dogs.
4 minutes. So, but
right.
You do sometimes in a longer story, you kind of build it out to where you're like, if it's not going well, I can just kind of end it here and move on. But you know, you can't just stop and start talking about something else. You have to kind of finish your thought at least, or you can, maybe you can get away with being like, it seems like you guys don't like this, so I'm actually just going to move on. And sometimes that gets a laugh if you just kind of break the wall. Mm-hmm. But I do always go in with a plan. I've got a notebook in my bag that if you looked at it, you would just be like, this is insane, because it's just lists of my jokes for every show, even if it's the same. Even if I have 2 identical shows back-to-back nights, I still, part of my like ritual is like I go and I actually write down in order the way I want to do the jokes. And they're almost always in the same order. You kind of always have an act that you're working on in comedy. Similar to music, you kind of measure it in hours. So if you watch a comedy special on Netflix, it's probably close to an hour long. And, the way in comedy you kind of work is you tour an hour, you record it towards the end of the tour, and then you release it as a special or an album, or, there's lots of ways to release that stuff now. And then you kind of stop doing that material, at least for ticketed shows where people are coming to see you on purpose. Because unlike music, people don't want to buy tickets to go see comedy that they've already heard. If you go see your favorite band, you're like, I hope they play my favorite songs. If you go see your favorite comedian, you go, I can't wait to hear their new stuff. And so it's such a different kind of timeline of releasing things and touring. And so basically, you always have an act you're working on. So I recorded a special about a year ago, and it'll come out later this year. And so then the goal is for once that's out, if you're buying a ticket to come see me, you won't hear hardly any of that stuff anymore. But if I'm being hired for a private event, which is a lot of what my calendar is now, I mean, I'm doing lots of volunteer appreciation nights at churches and conferences and, marriage nights and fundraisers. And so for those, most of the audience, they're not familiar with my comedy, so I can kind of say, okay, they want, 45 minutes or they want 60 minutes, and this is a group of, this is a women's conference, and so it's going to be 500 women. Some of them are married, some of them are, late teens. Of my whatever minutes I feel like I have of comedy, which 45 are going to be the best for this group? And then I'll kind of write it down in the order that I think goes best, and that's what I'll do that night, even if it's a mix of older stuff and newer stuff. Versus if you come see me at a comedy club, I'm going to be doing all of my new stuff and then filling in, or not new stuff, but like the stuff from the current, act. And then if I, have not filled up that whole hour yet, I'll fill it in with some of the older stuff.
Yeah.
There's a part of me as a preacher that's always been a little jealous of
course,
stand-up comedians.
We get to do it so many times.
Well, in the sense that, yeah, exactly. Like in the sense that once you've got your 30 minutes or your hour built, you've been able to work that, refine that, and there's always a variable for a comedian, but that variable is the audience, but the constant is the material, right? That you've worked for that hour or whatever. Whereas I think a lot of times for preachers, it's flipped. Like the constant is the audience, because you generally get, for the most part, the same people showing up to church week after week. There's always some people for whom it's their first time, or it's first time in a while. But for the most part, that audience. But the variable is the brand new material that you put together that week for that audience. And so you never get the chance to continue to work that material to refine it. Because I oftentimes after preaching, I'll be like, man, that was an okay sermon, but if I had 3 or 4 more times to do that, it would be amazing, right? It would be amazing. Yeah. So
the trial and error is so helpful. Yeah. And there's an easy solution to this, Matt. All you have to do is quit your church, write a leadership book, and then go speak at conferences all year. You can do the same talk.
That's the ticket.
And make so much money.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a little bit of that going on. But it's so helpful. It's one of my favorite parts about stand-up is that you do I can think of an idea today and tell my wife, hey, I'm going to Laughing Skull tonight to do 5 minutes to try this new idea. Record it on my phone, listen to it on the way home, say, okay, the thing I thought was going to work did not make sense to them. But that thing I said after that, they really liked. So actually, maybe it's about that. And then the next night, you go back and you center it around the new thing. And you go, okay, now this worked. And I added 2 things, and one of those things worked. And you just whittle it down and trial and error and build it up and cut it back down, build it up, cut it back down. Until you really get something that you're like, I like it, they like it. I have enough data to know this is good. And I can feel good about that. This is, what my comedy looks like. And the pressure of just having to perform for the same audience over and over again and always have something new to say, I don't know how you guys do that. It'd be nice to not have to stay in as many hotel rooms as I have to stay in. But yeah, I never know. I mean, one of my bits I do all the time is, my job's way easier than my dad's. You can talk about whatever I want. My dad has to do a new book report every week about the same book. And it's just I don't know how you do that.
That is so accurate. Well, but we'll kind of Speaking about, your background, your dad, your grandpa, is there anything though that is translated from what you've learned about them as these incredible communicators, right? That you've learned, that you've taken into stand-up comedy, that's helped you? Like, is there anything that's translated from their success as communicators, albeit in a very different venue, right? That you've taken and adopted into your approach to communication and comedy?
I don't know if there's any like one thing I can put my like finger on and be like, I took this, but I do think that growing up in church is such an advantage for anybody who wants to be a communicator, because you're watching somebody communicate every week at a high level. You're watching a professional communicator every week. If you don't go to church, you get that from like your teachers, I guess, but it's not the same. You're watching somebody stand on a stage and deliver a message effectively most of the time to a group of people. And I think you pick up on things that work, things that don't work. I think that, there are a lot of similarities. Obviously, you need to build tension, release tension. The rule of threes is effective just in communication, but also a huge part of certain types of jokes, kind of the rhythm of communicating, the rhythm of keeping something funny. Chris Rock, I think it was Chris Rock, used to always say he would watch preachers, and that was where he kind of got his style of doing stand-up from. It's a lot of like, saying a premise, repeating the premise, and then kind of going from there. And kind of marching around the stage and using that cadence that I think a lot of black pastors specifically have for him. And then I've heard I've heard pastors say they like to watch comedians. And so it's definitely, you're trying to engage your audience and really get them to pay attention to what you're saying and engage with it in a way that you can go home remembering it, or at least really enjoying it. But I'm trying to think of like more specific things. My dad definitely is funny. And one thing that I always thought was interesting about him is that if he did tell a joke in a sermon, he wouldn't like, he almost acted like he didn't like it when they were laughing. Like he wouldn't like laugh with them, which is in stand-up, it's good to not laugh at your own jokes. You kind of need to stand there and let them laugh, and then you keep performing. And a lot of pastors, the natural thing is when you make people laugh, you kind of laugh with them. But he never really did that. He was always kind of say it and then just kind of like be like, you guys done laughing? All right, we're moving on. And I think that's a very comedian thing. And I think I am probably better at that because of that being the way he is.
Okay, Andrew, this job is incredibly difficult, right? Like, there's a reason people's instincts are like, I would never. Like, if somebody told me, you want to do this job, you have to go stand in front of people and bare your soul and try jokes that are probably going to fail several times before you get it right. So, like, wax poetical for me. Like, tell me, why do you love this? Why did you make this your career?
You, like most reasons, the people that like their jobs, which is not everybody, but I think most people like their jobs because they're good at it. Like, it's fun to be good at something. And when you find the thing you're good at, you're willing to, pay the cost of what it takes to keep doing it if there's a cost. And it's really hard at the beginning because you're not good and you're performing in front of the worst audiences while you're the worst at the thing you're doing. I mean, you can't even get on stage in front of a good audience when you're new. Why would someone put you in front of a good audience? You're not trustworthy. So the hardest part for that, it's not hard for me anymore to want to do stand-up because I am good at it and it's fun and I get to be in front of good audiences. But where you really face the battle of what you're talking about is at the beginning. And I got lucky I was fortunate that I got through that quicker than most comedians do, because it's a really hard place to be. And you also have to do it when no one else needs you, because you have to be on stage every night. You have to be willing to go lose money to maybe make no progress. Maybe you will. You just have to put as many shots on goal as you can and be willing for none of them to go in, but hopefully some will. So the hard part is you're bad at it. You're not getting opportunities, and it's costing you a lot of time. And whenever somebody who has like kids and is married is like, how do I start doing stand-up? I'm like, man, I'm sure it's possible, but it will cost you a lot more in this season of life because you have people that are relying on you. And even doing it as my full-time job and making money from it and it being, what pays our bills, even when I'm flying somewhere to go do a gig that makes sense for our family, it sucks. to have to go do. But if I were doing open mics every night and trying to get, spots at my local comedy club and having to tell my wife, hey, I'm going to be gone all Saturday to go make $25 and do 12 minutes on stage, how could I ask her for that? I mean, it would be hard. It would be really hard. And so you kind of have to be in the right season of life to be able to do these things that don't make any sense. And you just have to love it and really want it. And it also helped that I really did not feel like my other job was going anywhere for me. It's not like I had two things I loved that I was choosing between. It was like, I have never found something I love to do career-wise until this. So even if it's scary and hard and maybe it's just, I told myself several times, even if this doesn't become my career, I will do this forever. Like, I will make time to come do open mics every now and then because I think I just love this. And if you can get to the point where you're like, I love this enough that I'll just do it no matter what, then it's easy to go through the hard things that allow you to get to do it.
Andrew, we'll land the plane with this question. What's the best piece of advice, be it from another comedian or maybe from your dad? What's the best piece of advice that anyone has ever given you about the work that you're doing?
Man, don't wear shorts on stage. No, I'm just kidding. That's my favorite comedy advice for men. It's like, don't wear shorts. That people are eye level with your kneecaps. Nobody wants
to see your
stare at a guy's kneecaps for that long. One thing that I really liked, and this is, I heard Nate Bargatze say this in an interview a long time ago, and it applies to, he was talking about stand-up, but I think it's a good life thing too, and it's, you always want to have somebody, there's two types of people you want just like in your weekly life for your career. You want to have somebody that's just 2 steps ahead of you, and you want to have somebody 2 steps behind you, so that you have somebody to ask questions that just was where you are, and you have somebody that can be asking you questions about where you are or where you just were. And if you have people playing both roles in your life, you're just always going to be really grounded, and you're going to be feeling really, I can't think of the right word, like realistic. Like, you're going to kind of know where you stand because you have the person right before you, right after you. You're helping somebody, somebody's helping you. I think in the interview I listened to, he goes, I can't go ask Jerry Seinfeld how to get booked on this club showcase. He doesn't know. It's all changed since he was doing it. But the guy that has been doing comedy 2 years longer than me, he knows everything I need to know about what to do this year. And so I think in life, like, just having somebody that's 2 steps ahead of you and somebody that's 2 steps behind you, where they're pouring into you, then you're pouring into that next person, and then hopefully it just keeps going. Like, I think that's just really healthy advice for, whether it's being a parent or a husband or just a Christian or in your job. Like, that's something I always am trying to think, like, do I have both of those people right now or multiple?
Very well said. And you've done it. You made it simple for us. Thank you for that. Thank you. And thank you for being on the show today. One final question for you. Where can people who want to see you on tour, who want to learn more about you, who want to get up-to-date info on the forthcoming comedy special, where can they go to get the latest on Andrew Stanley, the comedian? Yeah,
thank you so much for asking. Andrew Stanley on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active. My website is andrewstanleycomedy.com. That's got all the tour dates, and you can subscribe to my email list, and then I email you when I'm coming to your city. Is the best, most direct way. And then subscribe to my YouTube channel for updates about the comedy special. Hopefully some fun updates soon about that. And yeah, if you do all 3 of those things, you'll be hearing from me just the right amount.
Yeah. That's what the superfan does. Sign up for all those things. Do all the things.
Yeah. Love it.
Andrew, again, thanks for doing this, man. We really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to seeing you at VoxCon 2027.
I know. January. It's going to be fun. Can't wait.
It's going to be here before we know it. It's going to be a blast. Again, thanks for being with us, man.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to our conversation with Andrew Stanley about what it's like to grow up as a preacher's kid and then become a comedian. Rachel, what was your takeaway from today's conversation with Andrew?
I found there were a couple of things. I thought it was interesting that he kind of breezed past that he started out to be a writer and then he became a stand-up comedian like it was nothing. I could have spent a whole conversation talking about that just because I'm so fascinated about how people end up in the jobs they're in. So that's a whole other conversation. I love at the end when he said, I like it because I'm good at it. And I don't think enough people give credit to, you can love your job because you're good at it. Like, you can just claim, I'm good at my job and I love being good at it. Like, I think there's something holy, and I really do, about just doing what you're supposed to be doing, whether it's your job or, you know, that feeling when, like, it almost tickles your brain, like when you're living in your talent or your purpose or anything. And so I loved that.
Yep.
So,
and it's okay to say that you're good at something.
It's
not
100%.
a sin, right? It's okay to say that you're good at, and to find what works and work it. It's okay.
100%.
Mine was so many things. I really appreciated our conversation with him, but I just really appreciated especially how open he is about his faith. You know, he referenced himself as being a Christian and trying to ground his identity in the approval he has from his heavenly Father and his earthly family, and I just found that really refreshing. How he's able to do this work and be in the comedy space and still be a person of faith without having his faith like take over his comedy in a certain sense, right?
Yeah.
Like he's not a Christian comedian, he's a Christian who is a comedian, and I think that's like this really cool lane that he's found, right? And it's very similar to like Nate. I mean, Nate Bargatze, who you mentioned he's been on tour with, is very similar. Like, he's a man of faith, he's open about that, but it's not the content of his comedy, but it definitely shapes it. So I just appreciated that about him, and knowing that about him, and I love that he believes that he's in those spaces with other comedians for a purpose, to be a good representation of the Christian faith in those spaces, and to be a good friend to those people, and to be ready to answer their questions that they have. Like, he doesn't hide from that. He embraces it. I just found that to be really refreshing. So and I'm very excited that he's going to be with us at VoxCon 2027.
Me too. I forgot for a second that we met him because he's going to be at VoxCon, and I was like, oh yeah, we're getting like a whole hour with him. He's going to come and hang out and everything. So everybody should come to VoxCon.
Yeah, it's going to be, there's going to be a whole comedy show with I think some opening comics as well. It's going to be really, really cool. So, and it's all part of the VoxCon experience. So if you want to register for VoxCon or just get more information, head to gotovox.com. That's gotovox.com, and you can sign up, and you can join us here in Houston in January 2027, where we will have Andrew Stanley, Tanner Olson, Zach Zender, and a whole bunch of other people here helping us to refine our craft and hone our voices as communicators and creatives in the faith space. Rachel, thanks for joining us in this conversation. It was a lot of fun.
It was.
All right. Yeah, it was a good time. Let's do it again, shall we?
Let's do it.